next person that I would like to invite, somebody I want to thank personally, is Peyton Richmond. She's been one of my lieutenants so far. She's been an absolute just, she's gone out, gotten tons of signatures just by herself. And I want to thank her and also invite her to speak.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Here, I wonder if I can turn on my video, but that's okay. I just want to say, like, being a part of this campaign and getting to work with everybody that's behind Adam and all that he does is probably like the best feeling I personally get. And I know, like, from doing anything, the hardest part of this quarantine is honestly like not getting out and not getting to talk with the community members about Adam and what he stands for and getting petitions. Like, I actually really enjoy getting signatures from people, and as crazy as it sounds, it probably brings me some of like the just like such a strong sense of connection, a sense of like caring and like just genuine like deep love for other people, to like take time out of your day to go out to, even when people listen to me, like when I'm at their door, I just get so excited that I get to share with them such a big passion of mine and so many other people in this community. And like getting out to support Adam is one of the, like, is a no-brainer for me after all that he does throughout the day, and seeing all the other people that come who I know are like so strongly involved in other community organizations that do just as like just absolutely incredible work for nothing other than the sake of helping other people in Buffalo who really need it, and the people that actually are really struggling and really need their voices heard. And so just the best part of this campaign and getting out and doing petition work and fundraising work is just the connectivity that Adam is allowing us all to have by being a part of his team. Really hits home, and it's honestly the hardest part of this self-isolation quarantine is not being able to get out on the streets and petition and be with this absolutely incredible team. It's such a it brings me so much joy, and it's really tough not being able to do it right now, but we're gonna find a way to do it virtually and still get this great word out. So it's honestly just an honor to be a part of the team.
All right, Payne, what's your one word? How you felt about the campaign?
Gosh, just connection, you know? You just feel so connected to everybody in that room, no matter like if you just saw like them 2 minutes ago, like you're just coming back for your gloves that you forgot. It's like, hey, I think just connection is like, and being able to connect people for such a good reason is a really great feeling. Just straight connection.
I love you, Peyton.
Love you too, Chio.
So as we continue, obviously a lot of people put a lot of work in just for the beginning of this first, obviously, beginning of a campaign to get someone on the ballot. And I know that John Rivera put in the objections to try to object him and Quintana's ballot. Obviously, we got legit signatures. We'll be fine. So now to go into the next stage, obviously, there's a lot happening because of the coronavirus, and people who are in need of help. I know that I've been helping as much as I can, but I want to bring up someone that has been doing amazing work throughout housing justice, throughout making sure that people eat, just making sure as an advocate for all communities. I just want to bring Bridge. I look up to you a lot. You do a lot of good work. Can you please come on the line?
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out, Christian. You've done like so much, like to get deliveries out, and thank you for that. Yes, no, my name's Bridge Rouch. I'm speaking here tonight as myself, but I am one of the founding members of the Buffalo Mutual Aid Network. I'm just going to drop a couple of links into the chat here. This first one is just kind of like a master post of like all sorts of resources that we've developed recently, and these other ones, these are just some basic tools for like how to do like pod mapping, and I'll get to that in a sec. So this really just kicked off a week and a half ago. I was like sitting on my computer, like many of us, going nuts, like watching like all this news coming in and seeing the lack of action from like our at that time the state government wasn't fully stepping in yet. The federal government still hasn't fully stepped in the way it needs to, trying to figure out like, well, we got to do something fast. So there were some mutual aid resources that were being shared all throughout social media. There's so I was like, well, this is something we should kick off, we should really be kicking off here in Buffalo. Mutual aid is is basically the concept of solidarity, not charity. Is like the easiest way to sum it up. It's peer-to-peer support work that's you're working in like as hyper local as possible. Like you reach out to your neighbors, reach out to your block club, find out who is immunocompromised or has like the health conditions that put them at risk. Find out what they're going to need. Figure out like who has a car, who can drive, who has a bike, and can be out like doing some stuff. Who can like walk someone's dog, if someone gets hospitalized, like can you feed their pets if they are unable to. So I don't want to get caught too much up in the language around mutual aid. It's one of my irritants, personal irritants, so like with leftist organizing, is we can get really cut up on terminology. This is this is just basic like block club organizing. It's going out, talking to your neighbors, and finding out what folks need. So as far as ways to get involved, that first link there has like the post that on that Facebook page has like some links to either volunteer, just to do deliveries. There's also a link in there if you have like more of a like data skills, and you're good at like matching on a spreadsheet, like this person lives in this neighborhood and that person is in their part of the city, and like we can like match them up to get services one-to-one. But really, like the best way to get involved is just basically just step up to be like a neighborhood captain, and go out, like drop a letter in your neighbor's door, like let them know like what your contact info is, if it like is whatever comfort level you have with that. And just start making these conversations, because this is going to be like a long haul. Like I used to work in a food pantry, and like every month we'd have like the same clients who would come through, and those are the folks who are like hurting now. And like there's also like all the like an influx of folks who like are also hurting, like additionally to this. So like the systems were failing before, and like they're not going to catch up to this, like like that we can't go back to the way things were, because the way things weren't working, as Adam said. So this is like, that's just basically a summary of it, and I'm happy to like answer questions or whatever.
I don't know where the link is, babe.
Let me try it again. It's in the chat area. If you're on a computer, down at the bottom of the screen, there's there should be a button that says chat that will let you open up that screen.
When you're out in the community, what kind of reactions are you getting from people that you're working with? Is there a lot of resistance to the contact, or are people pretty welcoming?
So it's a mix. There's a lot of fear right now, because there's like a lot of uncertainty and confusion like around this virus. That was one of the things like we wanted to like help out with early on, is just like start to like cut down on social media rumors that were like floating around, and like try and get people like the real information that they need to know about this virus. So that's been like a little bit of what we've been doing. It's like I said, there's some fear just around like how safe can you be while being out. So we have been working with Wincush, and like we've been tracking down resources for folks on how to be safe. There's also just, I mean, it's not easy to go out and like leave your phone number for someone you don't necessarily know. But it's like, so it's whatever comfort level you have with that. You know, and some of us are able to like share that information a little more readily than others.
And then moving forward, what would you say is the number, the top 3 things that you need most above anything else?
Definitely labor, laborers, like, you know, like, you know, like right now we have a very small crew who's like doing the deliveries, you know, and like that's not sustainable long term. We need to get, you know, like really the best thing that I would ask people to do is, you know, just is to start building like that is, you know, like the pod map there, the pod map area, resources there is really start to like build these networks independently. This is not a centralized process by any means. This is something that everybody should be doing themselves, like, you know, within your like, you know, immediate community. You know, is like, you know, and that's, we do have like a pool of money that we're, you know, that we're passing through CEJ, you know, that, you know, will be available for anyone who like needs to make these deliveries. You know, but, you know, like ultimately it's like, so, you know, if you need resources to like get yourself started, you know, reach out to us. But ultimately, like the best thing folks can be doing, you know, is making those neighbor to neighbor contacts.
I gotta say, number one, the cattail on the side of the picture started
Yes.
cracking me
Yeah,
up.
there's 2 of them here, you know, and they're both very demanding.
So yeah, you were talking about, as I had mentioned earlier, the systems were already just so broken. So the great thing about mutual aid is that it is people coming together and working with and for each other. But the whole point of what we're talking about tonight is that they're doing it because there isn't anything already in place. Like, these are things that we should be taking care of. We should have had taken care of long ahead of time. I mean, there's, like you said, plenty of blame to go around as far as federal and state responses to this coronavirus. But the idea that somebody could lose their job and then all of a sudden they can't get health care and then they can't pay for food, because food, you have to buy it. You can't just walk into someplace and get fed. So like the work that you've been doing around that, and especially Christian as well, you know, that is absolutely incredibly important. And like our state has, in a state that is, you know, so-called run by the progressive side of the political aisle, there's so many gaps in what we're doing, and we need to do a lot better just on everything.
Yeah, and I would say like our nonprofit community is like, you know, doing a remarkable job. You know, and you know, like I really want to give a shout out, you know, to like, you know, like 2-on-1, you know, is like helping out with like answering people's questions. There's like neighborhood legal services. There's you know, the Center for Elder Law has opened up like their resource line to like anybody who like needs resource, needs legal help. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of organizations that are trying to address this, but you know, it's bigger than like just, you know, like our existing nonprofit infrastructure was like just barely meeting needs before, you know, because the needs are so great with like within our community, you know, and now we add this crisis on top of that, and it's just it's like, you know, it's like a, you know, it's collapsing things.
Yeah, I think that's what this whole crisis has shown. It's hitting all the pressure points in the system, and it's exposing all the flaws that have been there for a long time that we've been papering over year by year. Like, we need a much stronger safety net for every single person. Like, nobody should ever go hungry, and we have the ability to pass new policy in New York to make sure that nobody goes hungry. And we could raise minimum wages across the state to make sure that people have more in their bank account. I mean, almost half the whole country's population couldn't afford a $400 emergency cost. And so this is now kicking people out. Over 3 million people filed for unemployment. So yeah, we need to be doing a lot more at the state level, at the, you know, the very least.
I definitely want to thank some of the people that have been helping me. Avi has been working with the list of the mutual aid Buffalo, and has, I hope that Bridge, you're getting everybody that we did serve, so that, you know, your list is also showing that, you know, things are being done. But just in general, a shout out to Avi, Keith, and especially Eric Maldonado. These people have been doing deliveries, especially Adam Bojak came to come do shopping with us. So I just want to like shoot that out because so far we've spent $1,900 and still have about $600 to $700 more that we are going to spend. I said we're going to do deliveries on Sundays. I have a whole bunch of people calling me, but I also have campaigns to work on. Eve Shippins is lending her space so that we're able to station out of there. We're not asking people to pick up, but we are doing deliveries. And now we have a waiting list of about 40 something people. And that's not even including mutual aids list. But whatever is left over, we always give it to them, which happen a majority of the time. But I don't know, Bridget. I've never done this work before, but it feels good. But it's also we have to be very careful in what we do. But to go further, I want to bring up a good friend of mine, somebody that looked out for me when I was in need, like deeply in need to fight for my son. Miles came out of nowhere and gave me a check of $200. I never like did that publicly, but that's when I first met Miles. I had a one-on-one with him. He's a great attorney. He's a great friend. And I want to bring him on, and he's going to be giving us updates on what's happening with the bail reform, what's happening at the holding center, and being that he's at the front line fighting for those that are, getting judged to go into the mass incarceration system. So let's give it up for Miles.
Hey everybody, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, I didn't want to repeat the last time. Hi everyone, my name is Miles Gresham. I am an attorney with the Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo. I work in the criminal defense unit as a public defender. I am here, however, just representing myself. As far as what's going on with bail reform, the honest answer is I have no idea. As most of you know, cash bail was revoked for most nonviolent felonies and almost all misdemeanors effective January 1st of this year. And even before bail reform took effect, there was a concerted effort on the part of law enforcement lobbies, bail bonds lobbies, and other conservative groups to fearmonger and to spread a lot of misinformation to make the public think that this bail reform was going to have, dangerous criminals running wild in society and killing us all, which is obviously not the case. But so in response to that, what's happening now is we are waiting for the final version of the budget to come out of the legislature, because that is where changes to bail reform took place in the first place, when the budget was passed in, I think it was April of last year. And now what we are concerned about is that Governor Cuomo, who likes to, kind of be all things to all people, is going to use the budget process as well as the sort of truncated time to pass the budget because of the coronavirus outbreak to slip in rollbacks to bail reform. I have been calling all of my local elected officials. I've been on calls with other groups that are lobbying and trying to make sure that all of the Democratic support that was there for bail reform last year is still there. I know that Christian and I and a few people just rolled up on Senator Kennedy's office a couple months ago after he suggested that he might be open to bail reform rollbacks for public safety. And we were told that he was not going to roll anything back yet, but that can always change. We expect the final version of the budget to come out, I think, in the next week or so. And so we won't really know until then, because that is really a process that happens behind closed doors. We won't really know until then, unfortunately, whether or not our lobbying efforts to keep bail reform the way it is have been more successful than the really intense fear-mongering campaign from elements of the right. So that's kind of where bail reform is right now. And soon I think we will see whether or not there are going to be rollbacks or not. Um, does anybody have any questions before I go forward?
But it seems as if, from what I've heard, most of the opposition is from the downstate Long Island Democratic senators. Is that kind of your understanding as well?
The opposition to, you mean the people who are moving to roll bail reform back? Is that what you're saying?
Right. Right.
Yeah, so it's actually it's Republicans. It's Republicans. There are some of the former IDC folks who are still like kind of, crawling around, like Cro-Magnon man, who want to see bail reform rolled back. But most of the pressure that I've seen is really coming from Republicans. There was a Republican roundtable that was really closed door session that I know Christian happened to find out about at the last minute from a source in New York City, that happened here in Buffalo. I think about a month ago. The only person who was even allowed to speak in favor of keeping bail reform the way it was Kevin Stadelmeyer, who's the chief attorney for the Criminal Defense Unit, the Legal Aid Bureau, and he was only able to do that because he knows people on both sides and was able to make a phone call and say, "You got to get me in to let me speak." My understanding is that most of this is coming from the right, but there are, the Buffalo City Council, which is I think almost all Democrats, passed a unanimous resolution to look at rolling back bail reform. A lot of the people who call the police are Democrats, they're Democratic constituents, and those people are being made to feel afraid that bail reform will allow for, things like allowing, like I said, dangerous criminals to be released, things like allowing criminals to come back to the scene of a crime if they committed a crime in someone's home, to prepare for their defense, which is absolutely not true. And all these other kinds of fear mongering elements. Most of that, though, that I have seen at least, have come from elements on the right. But like I said, there are moderate Democrats who are starting to crack, and that's why it's so important to call everyone we have who is a Democratic representative in the legislature and remind them that we will be watching as well, and not just law enforcement, because politicians respond to who's watching and who's complaining the most.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. So, staying on the topic of jails, what about what's happening in the Erie County Holding Center and other, places of incarceration around the area right now? Has anything changed in those places after the coronavirus outbreak?
Yeah, it's changed dramatically. I mean, I have not been in the jail since the coronavirus outbreak happened. Right now, there's at least one sheriff's deputy that's confirmed to have coronavirus who was in the jail. I believe there may have been more at this point. But what's happened is almost all visits have been shut down under the reason of preventing the spread of contagion. So attorneys are still allowed in for non-contact visits, but even that is kind of difficult to do at this point because the jails are so shut down. And also, there's a fear of a lot of attorneys who also just don't want to get coronavirus, and so we are trying as best we can to balance our responsibilities to our clients with our responsibility to take care of ourselves and our families, right? Fortunately, and one thing that I just going back to bail reform, fortunately, the amount of people being released, I think something like roughly like 85% of our clients now are out of custody, which was absolutely not the case last year. And so the jail population is much lower now because of bail reform. And so, I am also the chair of the county specialist advisory board for corrections, and I'm part of basically a bipartisan 11-member panel, and right now I am trying to get a statement pushed through that would call for compassionate release of low-risk prisoners to further stem the spread of contagion in the jails. The New York City Board of Correction called for something similar on March 17th. Yesterday, the mayor of New York City, who has more power to release people from the jails than our mayor does, because New York City has their own jails, unlike the city of Buffalo, which does not. Our jails are run by the county. But the mayor of New York City recently released, I think it was around 300 more prisoners, and wants to release up to 1,000, to again stop the spread. All of this, by the way, just shows that mass incarceration is not necessary. If they're willing to, release people to stop the spread of a virus, and the question, begs to be asked, why were so many people in the first place? But anyway, sorry to get off track. So with respect to jails, it's yes, it's changed absolutely the way people experience them. It has cut off inmates from almost all family contact, which is incredibly traumatic for inmates as well as for their families. It's made it harder for attorneys to get into to see their clients. The contact area of the holding center, both the Erie County Holding Center and the correctional facility in Alden, is a lot bigger than the non-contact area. So if you have attorneys coming to see their clients, there's a much larger backup, and everyone can't always get in during the periods that they allow us to see clients, because there are only a few places where you can do non-contact interviews, and all contact interviews for attorneys and for family have been cut off. So yeah, it's changed the jails immensely, and my hope is that we can leverage this coronavirus to free as many of our people as we can.
Yeah. And then one last question I would have is, I've seen in other places where the mayors have taken proactive steps to tell their police not to arrest for certain things. And then I've seen other cities where they've continued to arrest for low level drug possession charges or probation violations, things like that. Where does the Buffalo Police Department stand on things like that?
Well, actually, bail reform didn't just change bail reform. It changed a lot of things about criminal procedure, including discovery, and also including what people are supposed to be arrested for. So as it stands now, many of the things that they were arresting people for last year, like, low-level marijuana offenses, which Byron Brown did put out a directive last year stating that the police were not to arrest people for low-level marijuana offenses. Unfortunately, it did not work. We saw an uptick in police charging people rather for violation level marijuana with misdemeanor level marijuana. Those were almost uniformly overcharged, but they used them to justify arresting people. So right now, bail reform makes it so that, the bail reform statute as it stands makes it so that many people aren't supposed to be arrested for low-level drug possession. They're supposed to be given an appearance ticket and let go rather than kept in the holding center. So that has, again, bail reform has kind of changed how we go about arresting people, or how they're supposed to arrest people, although we do all the time see police who violate that, and sometimes we're able to get cases thrown out because of it. But as far as what the mayor has done, to my knowledge, he has not issued any directives to the police as of yet to change their conduct in terms of what they arrest for. As Adam pointed out, a lot of other mayors have done this. I know they've done it in San Francisco. I believe they've done it in Seattle, and a couple of other places that escape my memory right now. But as yet, I have not seen the mayor do anything similar in terms of a directive for the Buffalo Police.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Miles. I really appreciate your information on the town hall tonight. One thing that I want to put out there is we need to fight against the state carceral system in every way possible. The
For sure.
bail reform was a good initial step. There's still so much that we need to do, including lowering sentences and just legalizing certain things that are just filling our jails and prisons with people that should not be in the judicial system in the first place. We should be treating drug addiction like a health emergency rather than a criminal act, which would be an enormous change for probably millions of people statewide. They get health treatment for addiction rather than going into the carceral system, ending up homeless or worse. So I mean, there's so much that we need to be doing on that front. But I thank you for coming on tonight.
I'm not the host on it. Adam, can you please unmute the number that doesn't have a name? That's Leslie Bishop. She just texted me. She said she wanted to also give an update. Just realize on the agenda, we have roughly 4 minutes left on this part of the agenda.
All right, I unmuted all three so she can start speaking and then.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Miles gave a really good update of the jails, but there's more going on. They stopped the visits at all jails a couple of weeks ago. Now there's talk about stopping the families from mailing in packages of food and personal clothing. That's the report I'm getting back from people inside the jail. So they're thinking after March 31st that the state prison is not going to allow food or clothing to come from family members or loved ones. They will be forced to order strictly from like Secure Pack or whoever, whatever organization gets paid. The other thing is that there are a lot more petitions out there calling for the release of those elderly with a compromised immune system, technical violations, or a year or less to serve. So I know I have a petition specifically for technical violations, but I'm seeing more and more people get on board with pressing Governor Cuomo to release these prisoners. RAP is also having a direct action tomorrow on these same issues, the release of the prison population, reducing it. So it's the Governor Cuomo and also the governor in California. So there is a lot of stuff going on with the jail. And I know that Blur is looking for organizations to support some right along with these same issues around the jail population. I know PPG sent out a mailing last night talking about some of the issues, but definitely reducing the prison population seems to be a very big one going on right now from all the organizations that email me and the people that reach out.
Great. Thank you so much, Leslie. I appreciate you being on tonight as well.
Oh, you're welcome.
And there's one thing before we move on to the next section I wanted to say. There are already a couple questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. You can put questions into that and I'll get to those, and we will get to those at the final section. Or if you want, you can just type them into the chat and we'll get to all the questions later on.
All right. For the Royal Rumble, my old championship partner, John Washington. But first, I want to say some things, man. John, I'm glad that you are going to be working with People's Action and doing your thing and Western New York Law Center. I'm just happy for you. I don't want to say that in the public space. I'm just glad, and I love you. And I'm just glad that you will continue being part of the fight and the way you are fighting for housing justice, the way you fought for the land trust and the fruit belt, the way that you've done many different things. I just want to, I love you, and I'm glad that you can find more peace.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Christian. Love you too, and really love that we're all here together talking about how to do this work. I know I met Adam because he is a housing advocate and somebody who's taken a lot of risk of his personal job position to help people and to help people in situations where other people wouldn't. And so for me, that's what makes Adam special, is that if you've ever been in housing court, if you've ever had issues with tenants, Adam probably works like half of his time just helping and supporting individual tenants. And so a lot of times in these lefty cultures that we're in, a lot of people want to talk about policy and organizing, but there's not a lot of people, especially people of privilege with law degrees, that are walking around looking for the most oppressed people and really trying to support them on the daily. And then at the same time, building power and using that knowledge and the ability to support someone to actually agitate them into organizing, into building power. So right now, obviously, there is a crazy housing crisis on every level. You know, in the city of Buffalo, you know, we have a homeless population that's growing by the thousands. We have thousands of vacant properties. And then for most people who are paying less than $1,000 a month, we have a market that's run by slumlords on one end and developers on another. And even those developers are slumlords. The Sinatras, Simonellis, and now these even new companies that are coming in and buying up all of the individual homes. You know, you're seeing a lot more of that. And so we're just seeing the housing court is booming. People are dealing with these issues that are crushing them. They're destroying their lives. And, you know, we all know what it feels like to wake up in a home that you don't feel like you can even fall asleep fully in because of rats, roaches, bed bugs, and other issues. So I just want to give a shout out to Adam for all the work that he's done to help. You know, I couldn't even tell you how many tenants, but every week there's a different person that we're working with, the support that he's given me and Amina in increasing our capacity to help tenants. And then even seeing the love that those tenants show back and seeing the way that they show up, you know, at housing justice events. Because they know that it's real, and they know that even if the policy doesn't get passed this year, even if we don't win right away, that they were supported, and that their neighbors were supported, and that their families were supported. So I just want to say that's one of the things that makes Adam special and a special candidate, is that he actually does this work day in and day out. And that is what's going to make him a great legislator. And that's what's going to make him someone that can actually co-govern with us. And not somebody we have to fight and negotiate with, but someone who's been in the trenches. So right now, I've been working on the Rent Zero and Cancel Rent campaigns. Rent Zero is trying to get the federal government to zero out all rent and mortgage payments for everybody, because right now it's ridiculous that in a world where we have 4 million people filing for unemployment, where we know everybody, like, it's an economy, and it shows, this moment shows solidarity, even if the right doesn't like it. In an economy, we need each other, right? There's balance. And right now it's out of balance because people can't consume, they can't work, they can't buy, which means they can't pay rent. And yet the banks right now are getting $1 trillion a day. On Monday, they gave them $4 trillion. Ever since then, they've given them $1 trillion a day and will through this crisis. So why are we having to pay rent? Why are people facing evictions? And, you know, in New York State, we have this 90-day moratorium, which I don't think is enough. But being and doing national organizing and hearing what's going on in red states around the country, it's people are crying. People are literally packing their stuff up because they know that on the 1st, the marshals are coming, and that in this crisis, they would risk the spread of disease to send marshals to put people on the streets. But talking to people in Oklahoma, Texas, it's crazy. So it speaks to the organizing power we built statewide, that we have this 90-day moratorium, but we also need to cancel those rent payments, support each other in solidarity, and even get ready to do eviction defense, because when that 90-day period is over, the marshals are coming and we will be in that situation. So again, through this mutual aid network, through all these other networks, getting ready to really stand there for our people. I think that the advocacy work we're doing is working, it's moving the needle, but at the same time, we're watching the big banks and big corporations doing the same thing and fighting for their self-interest, which is to make as much money off of this crisis as possible. Their plans are to do mass foreclosures and mass evictions and use these trillions of dollars to buy back up our communities and gentrify them even more. And so the only way that I see a path forward is for us, especially, to have someone like Adam Bojak in office. And I just want to say this, last year, Sean Ryan was one of the biggest hindrances to our housing justice agenda. The reason why we have 14-day evictions instead of 30-day evictions is because of Sean Ryan. And so I want to make sure that everybody knows how important Western New York is to New York State politics, because he literally was the difference in 2 weeks that people would have to prepare for and fight evictions. So while I'm very proud of the work we did last year to change the housing market, I'm pissed because Sean Ryan telling people that evictions were not a problem upstate and that we only needed 14 days, and watering down our proposals is the main reason why we're at where we're at today and why we still have to do the work that we have to do. So I'm excited to have the possibility of Adam, because I know he will win in that position, and I can only imagine what he can do to change the culture of the Western New York delegation, to change the culture of the rest of the state. Because downstate in New York City, we have people like Uline No, who just put out a bill to cancel rent in New York State, who are fighting as people who came from the movement, who were elected by the DSA. And right now we need that in Buffalo. We need that statewide, because we have a powerful movement, we have powerful policy, we have powerful stories, but we don't have people upstate that we can actually govern with. And once we get that, it's a wrap. And we will be able to bring the progressive agenda that we've always wanted. So, again, just big shout out to Adam for the work that he does. And I can see just so much potential in him being in there, advocating, fighting hard, and doing the work to make sure that these policies are getting passed, and that people in Albany know that these issues are not just downstate issues, and they can't divide us. And they can't divide us as upstate and downstate, but they can say, look, Buffalo is facing gentrification and evictions the same way that New York City is, because that's what they're doing right now. And Tim Kennedy and Sean Ryan and Crystal People-Stokes are all playing that game by telling their downstate neighbors, no, these aren't big issues for us and we're not going to fight for them. So I'm just so sick the past 2 sessions of watching that happen, and really excited that we're going to be able to not only build power through this campaign, but actually to get our agenda moved. Because it's so frustrating as an organizer when you move hundreds of people, when you move all this stuff, and then you see someone who should be your representative, someone who used to work for Push, someone whose office is right on Grant Street, actually undermining our ability to actually get things done for the people of Buffalo. So again, I'm excited. And to me, the only way that we have forward in New York State to get a homes guarantee, to make sure that there are no more homeless people, to make sure that we do have social housing, where our housing is run and owned by residents, is to elect people like Adam Bojak. So thanks a lot for all your work, and let me know if you guys have any questions about the housing justice stuff that's going on right now.
Yeah, thank you, John. I really appreciate you, all the work that you've done. One question I would have is, I know that obviously what's happening right now with the virus has kind of thrown a wrench into your plans as far as, what you were fighting for, or your agenda this year. But what kind of things were you going to be focusing on, and you could still focus on in this legislative session?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing was just cause eviction. We wouldn't even need an eviction moratorium if there was laws in place that made sure that if a landlord wanted to file an eviction, they actually had to go through a process to define, why are they evicting this tenant? What was the lease violation? And then on the flip side, what are the conditions of the home? How has the landlord been abusive? Does the landlord have other properties that are in bad conditions, and have they had other issues with other tenants? And so for me, I look at cars. Like right now, I'm riding dirty, right? My car has not been inspected. And that means at any given moment, cops can pull me over, take my car, and put my ass in the holding center. And so at the same time, we have people who are living in conditions where if they were inspected, the health department, and we've dealt with this, the health department would come right in and say, you can't live there. And yet we have slumlords that have their entire housing stock is in a condition that would get me arrested if it was my car. So just cause eviction is definitely the number one priority, because our people can't fight unless they're protected. We can ask people to take risks, we can agitate, we can organize, but it's hard to ask somebody to fight in housing court when they know that they're still going to get evicted. And we still do it, and we will continue to do it. But I can only imagine the power we're going to be able to build when we really have just cause eviction, which to me is like the right to organize for better conditions, and then rent control. Rent should not be increased unless the buildings are invested in. So for me, those are the two basic things. And if you look at the New York City housing market, they have these things in place. And that's why there are 6 million tenants in New York City that are not paying market rate rent, and that are stable in their homes, because they're able to get lower rents, and they're able to call up the landlord and say, yo, this is broken, this needs to be fixed, that needs to be fixed. And they know that there's actual accountability if they don't do that and if they retaliate against them. So those are the two main things that we've been fighting for. Another thing for us is social housing, which really is just public housing and things like, what what Push Buffalo and other organizations attempt to do in creating affordable housing, but to have it invested in permanent, right? Affordable housing is not permanent. 15 to 30 years is not a long time when you're talking about gentrification. I mean, look at how Buffalo is different in the past 15 years. There's so much affordable housing right now. Look at McCarley Gardens, look at Pine Harbor, that is all within 2 or 3 years of losing its affordability requirements and getting gentrified. So we want permanent affordable housing. Any subsidy the state gives out should be absolutely permanent, period. There's no point in even setting up affordable housing if ultimately it's going to end up back in the hands of developers, and to give tenants control over that process and to make sure that they don't just have a board like they have at the BMHA, but they actually, it's like, if you have a nonprofit, if the BMHA wants to write a check, the people should be co-signers. You know what I'm saying? If they want to spend money and make decisions, the people of BMHA need to be a part of that process to the point where they can say, no, if we don't like this decision, then you can't write the check and you can't make the move. So we're really trying to build back up the public housing, because it's a market, right? So if there was more public housing, there would be more people that had decent places to live. And right now, the private market is just not doing it. And no matter what incentives you give them or what deals are cut with developers, they're still shitting on people. They're still trying to make as much money as possible. And so we need more public housing, and then we need more protection for people in the private housing market.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question I would have for you is, April 1st, rent's coming due. What is going to happen in the, kind of in the grand scheme of things? What are people doing? And what do you hear is happening?
Yeah. Right now, landlords are organizing. They're in the ears of politicians, and they're making sure that their money is safe. So I'm going to be honest. I think that if you can't pay your rent, if you're trying to make decisions between paying your rent and feeding yourself, or doing whatever you need to do for this crisis, which even includes entertaining yourself, because we all deserve mental health and clarity, then you don't pay your rent. It's 90 days before they can start evicting. Even when they start evicting, there's ways that we can continue to delay that process. And we're going to be organizing our ass off over the course of that 90 days to make sure that people will not have to pay this rent. And if that doesn't work, then we're going to be building toward a rent strike. Now, this first, I do not believe people should do a rent strike just because we're not ready. And it's a dangerous thing. It's a very strategic move. And we're going to be doing calls, and I'll put that information out to everybody next week. On Sunday, we're going to be doing a call for people who are struggling with this. There's national calls, but while a rent strike is a good tactic, we have not done the organizing, built the power, and done the education to make that truly effective. So I would say this. You need to do what's in your heart. If you really can't pay, don't pay. And people like myself and Adam and Amina, Queen City Socialist, there's a lot of people out here that can help you figure out how to deal with that. But you need to make sure that you're connected with the right support systems if you're not going to pay. If you can pay and you're scared and you're afraid, I don't think there's anything wrong with paying, because I understand how people are feeling in this moment. But do not make the decision between, food and other things and paying your rent. You and your body, your safety, your health are the most important. We're going to be running a campaign to ask people in solidarity to start withholding their rent. And we're really targeting May 1st, just so that we have the time to make sure that everybody does this correctly. And that we do it in a way where people are protected, because we don't want people taking risks. And so if you know people who are talking and having these conversations about, do I pay my rent? What do I do? Please have them contact me. Please have them contact Adam. Please have them contact Queen City Socialist and any of the groups out there that are doing mutual aid, because we want to make sure that if people are withholding rent or deciding not to pay rent because they can't, that they're doing it in a way that protects themselves in the future, and that's actually building power and organizing. Because in my mind, we have 3 months to build a tenant movement that can win rent-free for 3 months. So again, I want to make sure no judgments, no stress on people. Do what you feel, but make sure that you've talked it through with someone who knows what's going on, someone who does tenant organizing or is an attorney, just to make sure that people are safe and they're supported in what they do. And my hope is that if we do our job right, that by May 1st, we will be able to have a nationwide rent strike and the type of action that's going to drive the federal government to waive rent for this crisis.
And John, we did just get a question in our Q&A Are there any bills on the table to stop rent with state senators?
Yes, there is a bill. Uline No and Junaris put a bill out. I can put the information in the chat. We do have a petition that I'll also put in the chat to support that bill. The bill is good. It does require that people prove their hardship, which bothers me. So we're also trying to negotiate with them to have it just across the board, no rent for anybody, because I feel like it'd be very difficult for me right now to prove my hardship. I decided to leave my job, but at the same time, it's affected the money that I'm getting. How do I prove that? So we're fighting and we're organizing to make sure that it's across the board. But I will put the bill number and the bill information in the chat, and definitely feel free to reach out to me if you want to support the organizing we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thanks again for coming on, John. You know, like you mentioned, when you and I first started working together was with Push around housing, and that's been a very important part of my life the last few years. And when I talk to these tenants and I see what they're going through, I've never talked to a tenant that just said, yeah, I have the money, I'm just not going to pay rent. They lose jobs or they lose a source of income if somebody moves out and leaves them in the apartment. And so these people, through no fault of their own, are all of a sudden facing a huge crisis in their lives, and it affects everything else, right? So the idea that we don't have guaranteed homes for every single person in the state is just an unacceptable thing to me. The idea that somebody could lose their home and then not know where they're going to go next, that should never happen, and that's something I would never allow to happen. It's part of our overall platform to make sure that people are taken care of in the way that they need to be taken care of. So make sure that they have money in their pockets, and make sure that they have a home, make sure they have food, just all that.
All right, it's about to be the final countdown going into Q&As. Adam, and thank you for the advocacy work that you have done with John and being in the front lines for those that's in need when gentrification is so impacting into our communities right now, especially in Buffalo, and it's happening throughout the country. But thank you, John. So now we're going into questions. These questions will be directly to Adam. If you have a follow-up question, please make it brief. But I want as many questions from different people as possible, so Adam could express himself, and hopefully, just bring your heart, Adam, bring the emotions and the stories that you actually do here in the front lines, and the advocate that we know you're going to be.
Yeah. So I'll start with the first one that we got from Tyrell Ford earlier. What are you doing to get everyone an absentee ballot so that folks will still vote in the primaries? This is a really good question, because that's probably how most, if not all, of our elections are going to be held for the near future. We can't have polling locations with people congregating and voting. Most of the states have postponed their presidential primaries. We have no idea when these things are going to be rescheduled, because we have no idea when we're going to be allowed out again. So for the near future, we're probably going to be doing a lot of voting by absentee ballot. I know that there are some efforts at the legislature that they're trying to get that moving, but that's going to take a huge influx of cash. And of course, Governor Cuomo is saying that the state's basically broke. So I'm imagining that they're going to find a lot of excuses to avoid making it universal, and they're going to put it on people to take affirmative steps. So the one thing that we can do is to continue to put it on all of our social media and talk about it as much as possible. And I would encourage everybody here on the call also just to make a big deal out of this, because if somebody doesn't know that they have to do something to get their ballot, their vote won't be counted. And our democracy is already kind of falling apart right now. So anything we can do to make sure that people's voices are heard electorally, we need to do that. So personally, I'm going to continue to make a big deal out of it on all our campaign accounts. And I hope that we can get the word out there as much as possible, but it'll take more than just our voice. It's got to be everybody's voices. So I encourage everybody to do it together. And there was another question from Tyrell. How can you ensure every child in Buffalo Public School has the same access to technology as private schools? Some students during this crisis don't have what they need to keep up with schooling. Yeah, and I know that back after the 2008 crash, they started to pull money out of our state school budget because most of our school budgets statewide are funded by Albany, 80 to 85%, or somewhere in there. And the rest of it comes from local taxes and everything. So most of it is state funded, and they were pulling money out of the state school budgets to help, even the budget after the 2008 crash. And then they said, well, we're going to do this temporarily. Down the road, we promise we'll put it back into the school budgets. And surprise, surprise, they never did. So statewide, they owe our kids' schools, they owe them over $3 billion with a B. That's ridiculous. Like the city of Buffalo is owed over 100 million alone just for our schools. So that's one thing, just making sure that our legislators are following through on a promise that they made would change the lives of thousands of kids in our city. But going above and beyond that, we should never be putting one school above another. If schooling is that important, every single child should have the same access to everything: books, iPads, whatever, tablets that they're using these days. I'm sorry, I'm getting old, so I don't know. But there is a lot of technology that is not being used and spread universally to all our school children. And start to think about how certain schools have these school resource officers that are really, they're bringing militaristic tendencies into our schools where children are trying to learn, and that should never be the case. So our schools should look the same from school to school to school, no matter what children are going there. And that's just to start, right? And a lot of it has to do with the children's lives outside of school. I love that the Buffalo Public Schools are still feeding children right now. I think that's incredible. They fed something like 40,000 kids in one day this week, and that is just incredibly heartening for the future. But that's just one small part of the whole overall thing. The simplest thing is, instead of raising our police budgets, we should be raising our school budgets. If we put that money in a different direction, we could make sure that children never enter the school to prison pipeline. Just build them up from when they're young so that they have the skills needed to get the jobs that we were talking about earlier, right? And just the money that's been sucked out of our communities needs to be put back in. So yeah. Are there any other questions that people want to put in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, I can see that and I can unmute you if you want to ask the question live.
When you win, what's your staff gonna be looking like?
I think that's up to the people that I'm working with on my campaign and the people in the community, because this campaign is not about me. It's not like I have a vision and I want everybody to follow me there. It's more, this is what the people want. So if I get elected, I'm going to go back to the people that got me there and say, who do you want to go with me? Because it's not just me representing that. It's going to be my entire staff, and that staff should reflect the people that live in this district, in our communities.
Throw the questions. Let's go. Throw the questions. You gotta catch them.
Thank you, Gio. I'm not sure. Maybe you were volunteering. That's cool. I got a question from Jude. What would be your first goal when you are elected? That's interesting. I know it's because there are so many things I think we need right away. It's hard to pick on just one, but just the idea that we should raise the minimum wage statewide and then tie it to inflation immediately. Like the idea that we are not raising it every single year to keep up with the cost of living increasing is just mind-blowing to me, that they've never done this anywhere. And we could be one of the first states in the country to do this. We're supposed to be a progressive state, and people think we are because it's a blue state. But we could actually be a progressive beacon to the whole world. We could show what a progressive state could look like. And yeah, that would be one of my first things would say, let's get more money into people's pockets, because there are over 100 billionaires in New York City alone. It's the most in anywhere in the world. There's 112 or something like that, and they have a cumulative wealth of $500 billion, half a trillion. So we could just, start siphoning some of that back into the pockets of people who need it. And, rather than letting the rich people hoard the wealth, start spreading it back to the people who are working for it, who are earning it for those people, and then letting them spend it and make their own lives better. That's where I'd start.
I got a question. When you get elected, how are you going to stand up to Governor Cuomo?
Yeah, he's a bit of a bully, and I don't take kindly to bullies. I really don't. And he's one of those guys that doesn't like to be challenged either. And I just don't care. I'm not impressed by that kind of attitude. And as a pretty Italian person myself, I'm not going to back down from this Italian governor. He just needs to have somebody stand against him, because right now, at least nobody in Western New York is standing against him. There's a lot of great downstate assembly people and senators, like you said, Generis earlier. Julia Salazar is fantastic. Uline, is really, really good. People that you don't have to be, just totally adversarial, but you have to say, look, what you're doing is not good enough. And here's what my people are demanding from you and me. So how are we going to get this done for them? That's what it has to be. That's the conversation. If he doesn't want to work with us, then we're going to do it without him. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Lucy. Hi, this is Lucy. I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. Okay. No, yeah. My big thing is I'm an elder and I have questions and fears about healthcare. What can you tell me that you can possibly do in your position to what's your stand on healthcare?
Yeah, I think it should be a universal right. Nobody should ever have to pay for seeing a doctor or getting necessary prescription drugs. And it blows my mind that some people would pay 3 times as much for a prescription than another person would for the same drug. It just depends on the plan that they have. That's mind blowing to me. So the one thing I would push 100% is the New York Health Act. And I had a great discussion with Kevin about this recently, just going down the coverage that this would give to people in New York. It would be an incredible change in how people look at healthcare in the state of New York. And so the idea that it's a lot more of that is tied up into this as well. You're thinking long-term care for elders. As my day job as an estate planning attorney, I deal with families that are thinking about nursing homes and how are we going to pay for our loved ones to do this, because we can't afford this. It's $10,000 a month, and how do we do it? And so at the same time that people are having these conversations, you have Governor Cuomo reportedly trying to cut Medicaid by billions of dollars, because he says,
I know.
Right. And he says the state is broke, but he won't raise taxes on the rich people. He'd rather cut money from the poor people. And so that is where we have to draw the line and say, you are not going to do this to our elders. And just Medicaid in general is for people who are left behind by the rest of the system. And we can't allow him and the rest of the legislature to pull more money out of poor people's pockets.
Thank you. I believe that too.
Thank you for the question. I got one from Peyton. What are you going to do to support the undocumented population of Buffalo and stand up to the terror of ICE? Yeah, I know that Buffalo, is Mayor Brown's decision not to call it a sanctuary city, but the west side of Buffalo is the most diverse area of Western New York in many ways. And that is squarely within the 149th district. And the people should not live in fear every single day. I've spoken and I've worked with clients who were just walking down the street to their job when ICE shows up and picks them up, and then they're in the Batavia Detention Center. And that is, you're living in that kind of stress every day. It's mentally exhausting. It affects your family. It affects everything that you do. And it's just because you crossed an invisible line without telling the right people. It's entirely unacceptable to me. We should be welcoming anybody who wants to live here. And we would, in my New York, in our New York, we would have systems set up so that we wouldn't have to have people sneak in and worry about things like that. We would have language services set up so that if they needed help from local or state agencies, they have somebody who speaks their language, somebody from that community, hired from their community, who can help them get the help that they need. And then just entirely fighting against the incarceration of those people. It is an absolute travesty what's happening with ICE and CBP. I would see if we could try to, I mean, we can't really make them leave because that's the federal law, but I would do everything possible to make sure those people are taken care of on a state level. And then this is a good question from Lisa. What would you do to protect Native sovereignty? There is no repeat of 1997. I am 100% in favor of honoring treaties with Indigenous peoples and showing deference and respect to them for their histories. I openly admit that that's something I still need to learn more about, because I'm not going to sit here and say I am an expert on that subject, but I understand that we are all living on stolen land, and those something like 30 to 40% of Indigenous people don't have running water. They have the highest rate of being killed by the police, the highest rate of poverty, and that is all by design. That is not something that is because of any actions that they took. So New York as a state has to do better for those communities. We're trying to suck as much out of those communities as far as casino profits and things like that, and we're not giving anything back to them. So that's absolutely something that I would want to address. I see a hand up. Okay, it's Lisa. Okay, so I hope that's a good start to the answer to that question, but there is still a lot of work I would want to do to learn more about that long relationship. And then, okay, fourth, how will you protect the small local business in the future so they won't experience this kind of financial hardship in the future? Yeah, this is really, really tough because small businesses have such razor thin margins. So if you have one down month, it could mean the end of your business. And it's not just you going out of business. That means the people who work for you are not going to lose their jobs. So having a more robust system in place to protect people who run into difficulty. Right now, I was working for somebody, and then as of November, I was working for myself. I am now not eligible for unemployment because I'm a self-employed person. And it wasn't by my choice. It was just something that happened, and now I can't apply for funds. And the idea that we are trying to make it harder for people to get help when they need it is not right. That's just not right. And small businesses are so important to our communities. We should be working to make sure that they don't have to be struggling every single month. And it just goes back to making sure that the safety net is there when they need it.
All right, we're getting down to the final countdown. Somebody else got questions?
It looks like Miles is gonna have a quick statement. Yeah, go ahead, Miles. I'm trying to unmute you.
Hey, can you hear me, Adam?
Yes.
Okay, so I was just listening to what you were saying about small business owners, And up until, I guess, last night or so, that's true. Unless you kind of organize yourself as an S corp, my understanding is that as a small business or someone who's self-employed, you're not eligible to file for unemployment. What I've heard, and I have not read the entire text of the bill that was voted on by the Senate last night. This is the U.S. Senate with respect to this, quote unquote stimulus package, which is mostly just giving rich people more of our money. But one change that I did read about was that they are, I believe, loosening the restrictions on self-employed individuals filing for unemployment. I have not read the entire text of that bill, and it has not yet been signed by Trump. But if and when it does, that could change prospects for a lot of small business owners and folks who are, work for themselves and who are finding themselves out of work right now. I know there are a lot of those folks right now in Western New York. And so I would just encourage people to pay attention to that, because it could change whether or not people who work for themselves can in fact file for unemployment.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And I hope that's, like you said, we haven't seen the full text of that yet. Hopefully we do see that soon. And if that's the case, then I would be very relieved, I know, as you said, it's a lot of bad in that bill, but hopefully there's enough good to hold people over, at least for a little while. I see Gio, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, just thinking through like a lot of the folks on this call, and just even like your involvement, other people's involvement in having passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act last year, and now ramping up, obviously like reconsidering focuses through this crisis, but ramping up for essentially a like big corporate tax polluter fee in the form of a bill that would not only like generate money, billions of dollars on a state level to New York, and be funneled back into communities, as well as green infrastructure projects, and thinking through like transition is inevitable, but justice is not. I guess, how are you thinking in the sense of renewable energy and the creation of thousands of jobs that now will be open to and specifically designed for frontline communities? How do you anticipate advocating for that and gaining traction and gaining support from your fellow legislators once you get elected?
Yeah, thank you. I imagine that'll probably be a tough conversation for many of the other legislators, just because they wouldn't see, as you mentioned, the frontline community and what they've had to deal with. Here in Western New York, we've had those large cancer clusters in Cheektowaga and then in the east side of Buffalo, which are conveniently next to the highways, right? So the people in these communities have been, dealing with these issues a lot longer than everybody else. And so their voices need to be at the forefront of any conversation. So if I'm going to be speaking with people in Albany about that, I would want some of them with me. I know your group has been doing a lot of great work around this. Like you said, last year, you were instrumental in helping. You had the CCPA, which ended up being passed as the CLCPA. So, they watered down a bunch of the things that you guys were asking for. So that means that the fight's not over, because if you didn't get what we were asking for, we have to keep asking for it. And so those things, there's a new one, the Climate Community Investment Act, and that needs to be pushed as hard as possible, because the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be, and the more people are going to be affected in the meantime. So this is not a matter of dollars, it's a matter of lives. And if we're not doing every single thing possible to save as many lives as possible, then we failed. And so that would be the attitude that I would want to take when I'm having those conversations, and putting it on those other people and saying, how much do you really want to save lives? And if you do, then you need to sign on to this with us. And it's just not with me, with us.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, thank you. And see, I'll do one more here. Will you freeze police budgets and advocate the funds go to city schools? So as far as the state has power over things like that, a lot of those are local budgets. It's just like the Buffalo City raises money for the Buffalo Police Departments through their own taxes, but state controls the troopers and other state park police and things like that. So I would absolutely look at starting to limit those budgets or freezing them entirely, because you know what? They don't need more tanks. They don't need more high quality grates on the front of their trucks. They don't need everything that they're getting. And this has been a long time coming and building up from the 90s, where they're increasingly militarizing the police at all levels. Absolutely, it needs to stop immediately. These people are supposed to be, in an ideal world, they would be part of the fabric of our communities. And right now, they just look like an occupying force. And so as much as I could do it at the state level with the state police and all other state law enforcement, I would absolutely freeze their budgets and start pouring that money into other areas of the budget, which would make it so that people don't have those interactions with the law enforcement. It's if we know, and we know this, we know that laws are enforced in a racist manner. Why do we keep doing it? And why don't we start to think about alternatives to that system? And that's where we have to start. So yes, freezing those police budgets at the state level and putting that money into schools and into our communities, into new jobs with it. If we pass the new CCIA and just reinvesting in people, absolutely, yeah.
Just so that people know, like, Gio, if you could talk about the CICA, because we're giving letters out, and if some people don't understand, then they could get confused.
Yeah, for sure. So the CCIA, which is the Climate and Community Investment Act, is the second part of our two-package bill for New York Renews. New York Renews being the entity that I work for. It's a coalition of over 200 organizations throughout the whole state. And what this bill will do in particular is it will tax corporate polluters. So let's say for every 2,000 pounds of emissions that are generated through corporations, there will be a tax fee of $35. And there's a projection that small amount of a tax will generate $7.1 billion. I think as we go through this crisis, and as we also go through the period of revisions, that money will increase, but that there's also specific funds or specific pathways for that money to be invested. I shy back from saying reinvested, because we really haven't seen an investment in frontline communities to this extent. And so being invested into prioritizing folks that have been on the front lines, both racially, also those that are still dependent on fossil fuel industry, and that may negate or think through we need to move forward with renewable energy and not leaving anybody behind, as well as programs for lowering utilities, because a tax bill of this nature, the biggest opposition or the biggest thing that people say, especially in business and the economy and in labor, is that it will increase people's utility bills as well as gas bills. And that's just not the case. So being able to provide infrastructure so that doesn't happen and the reiteration of harm stops. And you can look up on newyorkrenews.org. There's information on those two bills. I'll also drop my email and my number in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gio. So I'll do one more in the chat here. Just real quickly, this is being recorded and live on YouTube, and then we're also going to post the whole video on our YouTube page. So if you have anybody that you thought might be interested in watching or wasn't able to make it, please share that video with them. Our website also is bojakforny.com. So you can go there and learn more about our platform. Final question here is from Dennis. So he says, barbershops are a big thing in our community. There are barbershops on almost every block. How do you plan to support the independent contractors in another crisis like this? Yes, absolutely. So I was saying that right now, if you're not specifically taking the affirmative action to pay into the unemployment insurance, and you are a self-employed person like a barber, then you're not going to get unemployment benefits in a time like this. And so that's one thing that would absolutely need to change. So we're means testing our way into an economic crisis, just on its own. Like if there were no coronavirus right now and things had just been going on as they were, we would still be in an economic crisis right now. And we need to be looking out for people like barbers, like Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, right? These are considered freelancers or self-employed people, and that is just an atrocious way to look at an economy. These people obviously are employees of Uber and Lyft, but they designate them in a certain way so that they don't have to pay them benefits, they don't have to pay them health insurance, and there's a lot of great work being done about unionizing Uber and Lyft drivers, but they can't find each other. So there are countries that have stepped in and just demanded that, hey, those people are your employees and you're going to pay them like that. So that's something that New York should be looking into as well. I mean, I'm kind of getting away from barbershops, but there's a lot that is going on in our state economy that is benefiting the few people at the top, right? The CEOs of these companies, and the benefits are not going to the people at the bottom who are actually working to create this wealth. So people like barbers, they need protection in a time like this. And so having healthcare in place for them so they don't have to worry about that, that's a huge stress release right there. And then making sure that if they ever can't work, there are benefits waiting for them there to make sure that they can pay for food and rent. Then that's another thing right there. So yes, I absolutely want to do everything possible to make sure that businesses of all sizes are taking care of their employees and then themselves as well.
All right, so I guess now we're gonna close out. Want everybody, to go watch their shows or their movies or whatever you guys do, or they, play with their cats and have fun tonight. And I hope that everybody's safe and home and healthy. But to close out, I definitely want to know, and making an ask, if people are actually going to invest into this campaign. We're not looking for donations. We're looking for an investment of new people at the table. So I am asking if people can make donations. I don't know, Adam, if you could send everybody here individually your link after the call.
Sure.
And just see if you can make a donation. If you can't, when things get better, I hope that you can participate in hitting the doors. This is not a campaign that has money. This is a campaign that we're the underdog due to the fact that other people do have resources. We have the community, and we need to prove that the community, if they rise together, can actually win an election. But we still gonna need signs. We still gonna need literature. We're still gonna need the materials and the person that's gonna be doing this full time to making sure that we bring them the resources so that they're able to capitalize in the community, going to Hamburg, Blaisdell, Lackawanna, and including Buffalo. So let's rise with Adam. Let's not go back. Let's go Bojak. And Adam will get you a text message with the information to donate straight to the link. To invest into his campaign. Blessings, everybody. Stay strong. Stay home. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you so much for being with me.
Peace.